The Dillon Gabriel chapter in Cleveland is over, and the way it ended tells you more about what was really happening inside that organization than anything that occurred during the games themselves. Todd Monkin made the call. Gabriel has been removed from the Browns roster, and according to people close to the situation, this was not purely a football decision based on game tape and statistics. Reports suggest the evaluation went considerably deeper than that, into how Gabriel carried himself in the locker room, how he interacted with teammates, and specifically, how he treated the quarterback who was competing alongside him for the starting job. That quarterback, of course, is Shedeur Sanders. But here's where the story takes a turn that deserves close attention. Gabriel is reportedly not accepting his removal quietly. Insiders are claiming he's already working behind the scenes to push back against the decision, pointing fingers at the new coaching staff, claiming organizational bias toward Sanders, and suggesting that Andrew Barry's decision to move on was driven by favoritism rather than legitimate evaluation. And the reported connection between Gabriel and his former head coach, Kevin Stefansky, who is now said to be heading to Atlanta, adds another layer to a situation that was already complicated enough. Before anyone buys into whatever narrative eventually surfaces from Gabriel's camp, it is worth going back to the beginning and examining what actually happened. Because the documented record of how this situation unfolded tells a story that no amount of after-the-fact spin can rewrite. Dillon Gabriel arrived in Cleveland as a third-round pick. That's significant draft capital for a quarterback, the kind of investment that typically comes with real organizational commitment and a genuine runway to develop and compete. And Gabriel received that runway. He received more of it, in fact, than most quarterbacks in his position ever get. Kevin Stefansky was in his corner from the beginning, not casually, aggressively. He defended Gabriel publicly at every opportunity. He backed him internally in ways that became increasingly visible as the season progressed. When reporters pressed directly, asking why Shedeur Sanders wasn't getting a chance to see if he could change the trajectory of an offense that was clearly struggling, Stefansky deflected. Every time, without exception. His answers were the kind of carefully constructed non-responses that coaches deploy when they've already made a decision and don't want to be held accountable for the reasoning behind it. My focus is where we are right now. Translation: I'm not going to answer your question because the answer would reveal a decision-making process that doesn't hold up to scrutiny. Gabriel had a head coach fighting for him at every turn. He had a system designed to put him in the best possible position to succeed. He had protection from the kind of open competition that most young quarterbacks have to navigate without any guarantee of preferential treatment. The question was never whether Dillon Gabriel was given a fair shot in Cleveland. The question was whether anyone else in that quarterback room was. And the answer to that question, when you look at how Stefansky managed the situation, was clearly no. But having every advantage in the world only matters if you do something productive with it. And what Gabriel reportedly did with his advantages is where the story starts to turn. There was a moment early in the preseason that caught the attention of people around the league. A moment that, in retrospect, revealed something fundamental about how Dillon Gabriel viewed the quarterback competition he was supposed to be engaged in. When asked about the competitive environment in the quarterback room, Gabriel made a comment that sounded innocuous on the surface, but carried a very specific subtext that people in professional football immediately recognized. He referred to Shedeur Sanders and players like him as entertainers, and he positioned himself, by contrast, as a competitor. That single word choice communicated more about Gabriel's mindset than any stats, any game tape, or any coaching evaluation ever could. Because here is what Shedeur Sanders was actually doing at the time. Gabriel dismissed him as an entertainer. He was grinding through a situation where the head coach had essentially predetermined the outcome of the competition before it began. He was competing for every snap against a quarterback who had institutional backing he didn't have. He was delivering game-winning drives under pressure, clutch throws in critical moments, the kind of competitive edge that you either have in your DNA or you don't. That's not entertainment. That's the definition of competition at the highest level. And Gabriel's decision to characterize it as something less than that revealed a mindset that had nothing to do with competitive fire and everything to do with dismissiveness toward a teammate he apparently viewed as beneath him rather than alongside him. Reports from people close to the situation suggest the dynamic between them didn't improve from there. Every time Sanders made a big play or impressed the coaching staff, Gabriel reportedly found ways to minimize the significance of it. Instead of channeling the presence of a talented competitor into improved personal performance, which is what quarterbacks with genuine competitive mentality do, Gabriel apparently went the other direction. What started as a quarterback competition gradually became something that felt more personal and more corrosive to the team environment. And the head coach at the time responded to that deteriorating dynamic in the worst possible way. Kevin Stefansky's role in this situation is impossible to examine honestly without acknowledging how much it contributed to the dysfunction that Todd Monkin ultimately had to clean up. Despite having a front-row seat to everything, Gabriel's on-field inconsistency, the locker room tension, the fact that Shedeur Sanders was right there demonstrating real ability and earning consideration through his performances, Stefansky refused to adjust. He kept choosing Gabriel, week after week, even as the offense struggled, even as the logic behind the decision became harder and harder to defend publicly, even as reporters pushed increasingly pointed questions about why Sanders wasn't getting the opportunity that his play was clearly earning. Stefansky's response to one particularly direct question captured the entire problem in a single exchange. A reporter asked, essentially, "Why wouldn't you just try putting Shedeur in to see if it changes anything for the offense?" Stefansky said his focus was on where they were right now, not on exploring alternatives, not on giving a talented young quarterback a fair evaluation, on maintaining the status quo he had already established. Reports also surfaced that Stefansky was criticizing offensive coordinator Tommy Rees for not putting Gabriel in better positions to succeed. The implication being that Gabriel's struggles were a scheme problem rather than a player problem. But the evidence didn't support that framing. Gabriel's limitations on the field were visible to anyone watching honestly. The scheme wasn't failing him. He was failing to execute within it at the level required. Stefansky's blind loyalty wasn't developing Gabriel. It was insulating him from the accountability that every professional athlete needs to grow. And simultaneously, it was actively suppressing the development of a player who was doing everything right in an environment that was doing everything possible to prevent him from succeeding. The person who paid the heaviest price for Stefansky's stubbornness was always Shedeur Sanders, a young quarterback with genuine talent, with the competitive mentality that professional sports demand, with the kind of clutch performance ability that can't be coached, denied his opportunity. Not because he wasn't good enough, but because the head coach had made his decision before the competition ever started and refused to let evidence change his mind. Then the coaching staff changed, and everything that followed became inevitable. Todd Monkin walked into the Cleveland Browns facility and conducted the kind of assessment that new coaching staffs are supposed to conduct when they inherit a roster with unresolved questions. He looked at the talent, he looked at the tape, he looked at the statistics, and then he looked at something that the previous regime either couldn't see or chose to ignore: the culture. Reports suggest that Monkin's evaluation of the quarterback room went well beyond the measurable on-field production. The behavior mattered. How players carried themselves within the team environment mattered. How they treated their teammates, particularly how they treated the teammate they were competing against for the most important position on the roster, factored directly into the assessment. And specifically, Reports indicate that how Gabriel conducted himself in relation to Shedeur Sanders played a significant role in the decision to move on. When a new coaching staff evaluates a roster, they aren't just looking at who can play. They're looking at who fits the culture they're trying to build. They're looking at which players elevate the environment around them and which players undermine it. They're assessing whether the locker room dynamics they've inherited are healthy enough to support the kind of competitive, accountable, growth-oriented culture that winning organizations require. Gabriel's talent alone was not enough to overcome what the coaching staff reportedly observed in how he operated within the team: the dismissiveness toward a teammate, the reported pattern of minimizing a competitor's accomplishments rather than being motivated by them, the attitude that treated the quarterback competition as something to manage politically rather than something to win through performance. All of it factored into the picture Monkin assembled, and the picture he saw told him what the decision needed to be. Gabriel is gone. The decision was decisive. It was clear. And based on everything that has been reported about the situation, it was overdue by a significant margin. But Gabriel, it appears, has a different version of events he'd like the world to hear. The reports coming out of league circles since Gabriel's removal paint a picture of a player who is already positioning himself as the victim of a decision he believes was unjust. According to insiders, Gabriel is pointing fingers at the new management. He's claiming there is an organizational bias toward Shedeur Sanders within the Cleveland front office. He's reportedly suggesting that Andrew Barry's decision to move on from him was driven by favoritism rather than a legitimate evaluation of his talent and his conduct. He has not yet made any public statements, no interviews, no social media posts, no on-camera responses to what happened. For now, the silence is holding. But the word from people tracking the situation is that the quiet phase may have an expiration date. And when Gabriel eventually speaks, if and when he lands in a new situation that gives him a platform, the version of events he's likely to present will look significantly different from what the documented record shows. It is worth framing this clearly. These are unverified reports from league sources. Gabriel's public position may differ when he eventually addresses the situation in his own words. The full picture of his perspective hasn't been presented yet. But the pattern of behavior being described, the instinct to claim bias rather than accept accountability, to point at organizational conspiracy rather than personal shortcoming, fits uncomfortably well with the pattern that was reportedly visible inside the Cleveland building throughout his time there. When a player's first response to being evaluated honestly is to claim that the evaluation itself is corrupt, it typically reveals more about the player's relationship with accountability than it does about the legitimacy of the evaluation. And the reported Stefansky connection makes the situation even more worth watching. Reports suggest that Kevin Stefansky, now said to be heading to the Atlanta Falcons as head coach, may be trying to bring Gabriel with him to his new organization. That alone would be notable but not particularly unusual. Coaches frequently pursue players they've previously worked with when they take new positions. The familiarity, the relationship, the shared history, all of it can have legitimate value in building a roster. But the reports go further than just a potential reunion. According to sources discussing the situation, Stefansky is reportedly encouraging Gabriel to go public with complaints about the Cleveland Browns organization. If accurate, that represents something considerably more concerning than a coach simply pursuing a familiar player. A head coach pushing a former player to publicly attack his previous employer is a breach of the professional conduct norms that typically govern how coaches operate within the league's ecosystem. Organizations expect that former coaches will move on and build their own programs without actively undermining the teams they left behind. Encouraging a player to wage public narrative war against your previous organization crosses a line that most coaching professionals are careful to respect. If these reports are accurate, what it suggests is a coordinated effort between Stefansky and Gabriel to get ahead of the story, control the narrative, and paint Cleveland's new regime as the villain in a story where the documented evidence points in a very different direction. Gabriel had every advantage during his time in Cleveland. A head coach fighting for him at every turn, protection from the kind of open competition that forces players to earn their standing through performance, more runway than most quarterbacks in comparable positions ever receive. He responded to that unprecedented support by underperforming on the field and reportedly creating friction off it. The coaching staff that evaluated him honestly, free from the loyalty dynamics that clouded the previous regime's judgment, decided the evidence warranted moving on. If Stefansky brings Gabriel to Atlanta and Gabriel subsequently goes public with criticism of Cleveland, the narrative they construct will need to contend with facts that are already documented and available. And those facts don't support the victim framing that appears to be in development. While the noise around Gabriel's departure generates the kind of drama that sports media cycles on, the story that actually matters is the one happening inside the Cleveland Browns facility right now. And that story has one central figure. Shedeur Sanders came to Cleveland as a fifth-round pick. That draft position, in the NFL's institutional hierarchy, means you are expected to earn absolutely everything. Nobody hands you anything at that draft slot. Nobody protects you from competition. Nobody builds a system around your strengths and shields you from accountability when you struggle. You show up, you work, you compete against everyone the organization puts in front of you, and you either prove yourself or you don't. Shedeur proved himself, repeatedly, under circumstances that were specifically working against him. He competed against a teammate who was publicly dismissing him as an entertainer rather than respecting him as a competitor. He competed under a head coach who had already made his decision and was actively preventing Sanders from receiving the evaluation, opportunities his performances were earning. He existed in an organizational environment where the quarterback ahead of him on the depth chart had institutional protection that had nothing to do with who was playing better football. And through all of that, through the dismissiveness, the blocked opportunities, the frustration of performing well enough to earn something and having it withheld because someone else's political standing took priority, Shedeur Sanders kept showing up. He didn't create drama. He didn't go to the media to complain about his treatment. He didn't demand a trade or threaten to disengage from the process. He showed up every day, worked every rep, competed in every opportunity he was given, and delivered when the moments came. Game-winning drives, clutch throws under pressure, the kind of performances that don't require coaching endorsement to be visible. They speak for themselves through the scoreboard and the game tape. The psychological weight of competing in an environment that is actively working against your success is something most people underestimate. It's not just the physical competition. It's knowing that the person making the decisions has already decided against you regardless of what you do. It's processing the frustration of earning something through merit and watching it be given to someone else through preference. It's maintaining professional focus and competitive intensity when the structural incentives of your own organization are telling you that your effort doesn't matter. Most players in that situation either disengage emotionally or create the kind of public drama that gives them an outlet for the frustration. Shedeur did neither. He stayed locked in, he competed, and he let the work speak for itself. Now, under Monkin, he's finally in an environment where the evaluation is honest, the opportunity is real, and the organizational culture rewards performance rather than protecting predetermined outcomes. The head coach speaks about him with genuine enthusiasm. The front office is building around him with visible commitment. The coaching system is being designed to develop his strengths rather than suppress them. That's what earned opportunity actually looks like. And it's the direct result of a player who refused to let a compromised environment become an excuse for anything less than his best effort. The noise is going to continue. That much is predictable. Whatever narrative Gabriel eventually puts forward, whether through his own public statements, through strategic leaks from his camp, or through the platform that a potential Atlanta landing would provide, it's going to frame the Cleveland situation in terms that serve his interests rather than reflecting the documented reality. And if Stefansky is indeed encouraging that narrative from his new position, the noise could escalate into something that generates genuine media cycles and forces the Cleveland organization to respond in ways it probably doesn't want to spend energy on during the most important offseason of its rebuilding process. But noise is noise, and work is work, and the distinction between the two has never been clearer than it is right now inside the Cleveland Browns building. The work says that Monkin evaluated the roster honestly, identified what was contributing to the culture he wants to build and what was undermining it, and made decisive moves accordingly. The work says that the offensive line is being rebuilt to protect the quarterback the organization has committed to. The work says that the receiver room is being evaluated and upgraded to give that quarterback legitimate weapons. The work says that every move, every signing, every draft consideration, every personnel decision flows through the same organizational filter. How does this help Shedeur Sanders succeed? Gabriel's removal is one piece of that larger puzzle. It's significant because of what it reveals about the standards the new regime is establishing. But it's one piece, and the picture it's part of is considerably larger and considerably more important than any single player's departure from the roster. Step back and see what this entire situation actually tells you about where the Cleveland Browns are right now. A new coaching staff walked in and assessed the roster with fresh eyes and no loyalty debts. They saw a talented young quarterback who had been suppressed by a system that prioritized political comfort over competitive merit. They saw a backup quarterback whose conduct and attitude didn't meet the cultural standards the new regime intended to establish. They saw an offensive infrastructure, line, weapons, coaching system that needed to be rebuilt from the ground up to support the player they believe can lead this franchise forward. And they acted on every one of those assessments, decisively, publicly, without apology. Gabriel is gone because the full evaluation, talent, performance, conduct, cultural fit didn't justify keeping him, not because of some conspiracy driven by favoritism, because a legitimate assessment produced a clear conclusion. Stefansky's potential role in whatever narrative emerges from Gabriel's camp will need to be evaluated as more information becomes available. For now, the reports are concerning but unconfirmed. What is confirmed is the pattern that existed under Stefansky's leadership in Cleveland, a pattern of protecting one quarterback from competition while suppressing another's opportunity despite clear evidence that the suppressed player was performing at a level that warranted genuine evaluation. That pattern is over. Monkin ended it, and the organizational direction that replaced it is building something that looks fundamentally different from what existed before. Shedeur Sanders finally has the environment he earned. The coaching staff believes in him. The front office is investing around him. The culture rewards competition and accountability rather than political hierarchy and predetermined outcomes. The noise from outside the building, from Gabriel's camp, from Stefansky's reported maneuvering, from the media voices who spent 2 years pushing for anyone but Shedeur, is going to continue. That's the nature of professional sports in the modern media landscape. Noise is constant. Narratives compete for attention. The loudest voices often have the least connection to what's actually happening. But the work happening inside the building is what determines outcomes, and the work is pointing clearly in one direction. The Gabriel chapter is closed. The Stefansky chapter is closed. The Cleveland Browns are building something new around a quarterback who earned his position through performance, through professionalism, and through the kind of competitive resilience that survives environments designed to break it. The rest is just noise. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Was Gabriel's removal the right call based on everything that's been reported? Is the Stefansky connection something Cleveland needs to worry about? And does Shedeur Sanders finally have the environment he deserved from the beginning? Every perspective matters here, because the next chapter of this story is about to be written on the field.